What's good, people? Well, disbarred, disgraced former attorney Alex Murdaugh is back. This time, federal prosecutors are alleging that Murdaugh failed the polygraph and has lied to the FBI, thus violating his plea agreement by not being honest about the whereabouts of $6 million he stole from clients and about the potential involvement of another unnamed attorney. Let's get comfortable and talk about how this will impact the federal prosecution. Now, when Murdaugh pled guilty to his federal crimes, he signed a fairly standard plea agreement. The federal government has plea agreements they use in just about every case that have common standard terms. One of the standard fundamental terms is the requirement that the defendant cooperate with law enforcement and be completely honest about all knowledge about criminal activity, their involvement in the crimes, location of evidence, and identifying who else might be involved. Now, the way these agreements work is if you lie to the federal government or to the FBI, you're in breach of the federal plea agreement. And the consequences are fairly severe. So whenever I have a client or had a client that was interested or considering signing a federal plea agreement, I would discuss things like that with them in advance. That although it's counterintuitive to be honest with law enforcement, you have to be on board and be all in. Being willing to confess full activity and knowledge about your involvement in the crime, the location of evidence, the involvement of other people. I mean, sometimes it involves and requires giving information about crimes they don't even know about, or unfortunately, even giving information about people that you care about and their involvement in the criminal activity. And honestly, when I have clients I'm not all that sure about, it's not uncommon for me to hire a private polygraph and have that done under my direction. And what I'll do is I'll hire someone, have them come to my office, discuss the case with them, give them the investigative reports, discuss the relevant issues and questions I think the government's going to ask my client about, and have them administer the polygraph and discuss the results with me. And if I got a client that failed the polygraph, I'll discuss it with them and say, listen, this is the problem. You're failing this. They say you're lying about this. It's going to be a problem if you can't be honest about it. Because if they can't be honest, there's no point in signing the plea agreement because it's only going to make it worse in the long run. Federal prosecutors allege that Murdaugh was interviewed and polygraphed on multiple occasions. And each time, when asked about the location of about $6 million and about the involvement of another unnamed attorney, Murdaugh failed the polygraph. Now, honestly, I gotta call it like I see it. I would not be surprised that Murdaugh lied. I mean, when has he not lied? For years, he lied to his clients, his partners. When he was prosecuted for murdering his wife and son, he lied to his lawyers about his location and involvement. So I'm not surprised that he lied to the FBI. And I want to be clear, I don't think federal prosecutors are trying to jam Murdaugh up and stick him with more time. I mean, they would much rather have the information, find the money, try to make the victims whole, try to identify who else was involved so they can be prosecuted. And I'm certain he didn't just fail one time and they filed this motion with the court. The way it would have happened is he would have been interviewed, failed the polygraph, and they would have talked to him and said, listen, Alex, here's the deal. We got problems here. You failed this question, you failed that question. They would have allowed him to talk to his attorneys. His attorneys would have gotten involved and said, hey, Alex, these are the questions that you're having problems with. You got to be honest. And he would have presumably said, fine, I'll go back and get everything straight. And they interviewed him again. Then he fails the polygraph again. And they start this process and go back and forth until finally they just realize, you know something, this guy is never going to tell the truth. He's only going to continue to lie, so we have no choice but to file this motion with the court indicating he's violating the plea agreement. Now, I've always believed that there was money that was missing. I mean, when you think about the amount of money that he stole, over $12 million, there's no way you can just make that kind of money disappear. There's only so much stuff you can buy, only so many opioids you can take. I've always believed he had the money hidden somewhere. And honestly, I think in order to really do that, he would have needed the help of someone to help him hide the money. That person is probably the unnamed attorney he's trying to protect. When a defendant violates a federal plea agreement, there are 4 main consequences. Number 1, the government can reinstate any criminal charges they dismiss as part of the plea agreement. which means Murdaugh can be re-indicted for additional crimes, making him subject to even more time in prison. Number 2, the government can revoke any agreement or recommendation they're willing to make about how much time you serve, which means Murdaugh can be faced with serving even more time than whatever was discussed or recommended as part of the plea agreement. Number 3, when a defendant enters into a federal plea agreement, one of the protections that he has is when he cooperates with law enforcement and gives them information, they will not use the information he gives them in order to prosecute him for additional crimes. But if you violate the plea agreement, then the government can take the information you gave, information they didn't know about when they prosecuted you, and now use that to indict you for additional criminal conduct. Number 4, in Murdaugh's case, as part of his plea agreement, the federal government agreed to recommend his federal sentence run concurrent with his state time. Now, they will be asking the court to make the federal sentence run consecutive to his state time, which means that his federal sentence would not start until he completed serving his state time, which means he will serve more time in the long run. Now, you may be thinking Murdaugh may say, you know something, forget about it, and withdraw his guilty plea, back out of the agreement. Unfortunately, those are not good options for him. When you sign a federal plea agreement, there are a number of things that you agree to. One of those things is you are not allowed to withdraw your guilty plea, which means that if he doesn't like the sentence that he's getting or things aren't going the way he thought they would go, he cannot withdraw his plea, can't change his mind and ask for a trial. Another agreement you make is you waive your right to appeal the guilty plea and you waive your right to appeal the sentence. So for all intents and purposes, Murdaugh is stuck like Chuck. Now, honestly, even if this was not Alex Murdaugh, I wouldn't be all that surprised. I've had clients do the exact same thing. They get in trouble, they want the benefit of the deal, they're breaking sentencing, they reduce time, they dismiss charges, but when it's time to cooperate and be honest, they want to sit down with the federal government and say, oh, I don't know nothing, oh, I don't remember nothing, it was so long ago, I can't name anybody. And I say, listen, it doesn't work that way. You have to be all in. These are things you kind of have to agree to and be on board with if you're going to do this. So while on one hand, I'm not totally surprised that Alex Murdaugh would lie to the FBI, what boggles my mind is you would think that Alex Murdaugh and his lawyers would have known that all this information would have been vetted prior to him signing the plea agreement. Murdaugh had to know he'd be polygraphed on these details and that the FBI and the federal government would try to corroborate their information. Otherwise, why bother? Honestly, with Alex Murdaugh, the only thing you can say for sure is nothing's for sure. That's it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. There are so many topics to talk about. I appreciate you taking the time to join me on this legal deep dive, but please subscribe, leave me your comments, and tell me the legal issues you want to talk about. You can find me on YouTube, social media, and your favorite podcast platform. Until then, that's it.